Some of the richest and most famous billionaires might actually have some shady stuff going on. Even Elon Musk, the super love guy, had a close call with the law. Back in 2018, he tweeted about taking Tesla private, making the stock price shoot up. Well, it turns out he was lying, and when people found out, the stock crashed. Almost got him a 25-year prison sentence for fraud, but his billionaire status and a team of lawyers saved the day. Still, he had to cough up a $40 million fine, and now his tweets need the board's approval. Now there's this other billionaire, Alan Stanford, who ended up behind bars for life. Built his empire in banking, promising crazy returns on investment. If you gave his bank $100, he'd supposedly give you back $200, while others could only manage $120. Pretty sweet, right? Well, the Fed got curious about his money-making methods, so he tried to hide in Miami, thinking it was the Wild West of business. He even fled to Antigua in the Caribbean, paying his staff big bucks to keep things hush-hush. But then there's this guy, Charles Hazlitt, one of his employees who started poking around. When a client asked about their money, Charles wanted to see the bank's portfolio. A normal thing to ask. But nope. Since they moved to Antigua, he got a sketchy response. They said it was some secret sauce to double everyone's investments. Well, Charles wasn't buying it, and kept digging. Stanford had to do whatever it took to keep him quiet. So Stanford tried to throw Charles off the scent by sending him to the fancy headquarters, but that only made Charles more suspicious. Everything looked posh, but it seemed like no one was actually working. Charles chatted with the bank manager, who turned out to be clueless about banking. Well, Charles had his BS meter going off the charts, so he decided to bail and tipped off the U.S. government. Little did he know, the FBI was already on to Stanford. The feds had been eavesdropping on Stanford's calls, checking his records, and running a sting operation to build a case. It turns out that Stanford was running one of the biggest Ponzi schemes ever. He was living the high life with investors' money, private planes, gold jet skis, the whole deal. Instead of paying back investors with actual profits, he was using new investors' funds. And that's not all. They discovered he was getting drug kingpins to launder their money. Despite having all this information, the FBI needed more to nail him. Since Stanford's headquarters were outside the U.S., it made things tricky. Stanford stayed one step ahead, practically becoming a god on the island. He even paid the lead regulator $200,000 a year to turn a blind eye. Eventually, he basically made himself the regulator, playing by his own rules. Well, as you might imagine, this ticked off the U.S. government big time. They did something unprecedented. They told Antigua to change their laws or face consequences. But Stanford and Antigua called their bluff, kept doing their thing, and grew even faster for about 15 years. He was raking in about $1 million a day, making him worth a cool $5 billion. So was it fun being a billionaire? Well, yeah. But inevitably, it all came crashing down. In 2009, the U.S. finally had enough evidence to charge him, and Stanford's arrest became headline news. Initially, Stanford was like, "Hell no, it's not a Ponzi scheme, and I'd punch you for saying otherwise," when faced with allegations. He vehemently denied any involvement with Mexican drug cartels as well. Fast forward 3 years, and he got hit with 13 counts of fraud, landing a 110-year prison sentence. All his investors, including many elderly folks looking for a safe retirement investment, lost everything. To this day, Stanford's sticking to his denial. But hey, he's at least spending his life behind bars for it. Now on to another shady billionaire saga. This family, the Sacklers, made their fortune by turning people into zombies and essentially killing them. Yep, it's not just one evil billionaire, it's a whole family of them. It all kicked off when the Sacklers bought a small company called Purdue and came up with a drug called OxyContin, a super potent pain reliever. They claimed it had an addiction rate of less than 1%. The real number was 133%. To get FDA approval, They allegedly strong-armed the guy responsible for green-lighting the drugs. Once the drug hit the market, addiction cases shot up. Instead of owning up to it, they blamed patients for not using it right. At this point, OxyContin wasn't mainstream yet, so their genius move was to get as many people addicted as possible. They went all out with advertising, dished out free pills, and incentivized pharmacists to prescribe the drug. They even flew doctors out to fancy seminars, essentially free vacations, to push their drug. To keep regulators at bay, they donated millions to politicians. The Sacklers turned into marketing wizards, but the nasty long-term effects of their drug were just starting to come to light. Oxy was crazy expensive, so if folks got hooked, they'd run out of cash and switch to cheaper stuff like heroin. That's when the real zombie apocalypse kicked in. The ones who were initially prescribed that drug are now in a zombie-like state in homeless camps, and many ended up ODing. If you spot a homeless person messed up on drugs, there's an 80% chance it's because of those Purdue Pharma guys. Like all illegal empires, things started falling apart. Hundreds of doctors were getting busted for handing out pills just to make a quick buck. But Purdue, the big shot company, didn't face any consequences for years. Finally, in 2004, they got hit with charges. Deceptive marketing was the culprit because they said their pills lasted 12 hours, but they only lasted 8. This set up the perfect addiction cycle, making people take more and more. Purdue settled by paying a $10 million fine, but they didn't have to change a thing. So, for 3 more years, they were ruining lives until the feds came after them in 2007. After a hefty lawsuit, Purdue admitted they knew their drug was addicted and exploited it for profit. They coughed up a $600 million fine. But here's the sneaky part. The feds couldn't touch the Sackler family, so they got off scot-free. Don't be fooled by that $600 million fine. The Sacklers made billions off ruining lives. They're estimated to have caused the deaths of over 200,000 people, yet they'll never see the inside of a jail cell. But that's old news. Bigman Freed just pulled off one of the biggest scams ever and got thrown in the slammer. So this guy, Sam Bigman Freed, also known as SBF, kicked off a crypto trading gig called Alum Research. It was basically a high-stakes crypto hedge fund where they played with borrowed money. He figured out that Bitcoin prices were higher in Japan than the US, so he played the game, buying low in the US and selling high in Japan. It worked like a charm until people caught on and the prices evened out. And here's the grand reveal. SBF was lending more than half of the customers' funds to Alum Research, which was basically blowing it on trades, mansions, political donations. You name it. So this genius mastermind ends up facing 7 counts of fraud and looking at up to 110 years in the slammer. People lost everything because of his ego trip. Imagine trusting your Christmas bonuses and savings to FTX and having it all vanish because of this man's greed.